Hey folks, I hope you're all good. So, before we get into this, I have to give you a massive speculation warning. Now, I can't stand shows in general, of which there are many, which will chuck a couple of little facts in there to add plausibility and then just fill the rest in with bullshit and speculation. That being said, this video is about an account which is nearly 40 years old now. And it's just based on a couple of different independent witness testimonies, plus some information that I found on the internet, which, as we know, is the safest source of information ever made. So, I would like you to consider this entertainment only, but if it sparks your interest beyond that, then that's fantastic. It certainly has done mine, but it wouldn't be fair of me to impose that on you. So, what we can say for definite is that in 1988, off the coast of Puerto Rico, something really weird happened. So this is what I found out. So, I want to give a big shout out to Eyes on Cinema's YouTube channel. That's where I found these independently shared videos and then realised that there was probably a link between the two. It's a fantastic source of archived information and deserves all the attention it can get. So this starts with the account of Amori Rivera, who in 1988 was a hotel worker in Puerto Rico who had a camera on him because he was going to take photographs of his friend's band. And driving to his accommodation, he ended up having a pretty bizarre abduction encounter. But I'm not going to focus on that because, as convincing as it sounds, it is all just his one account. So I'm just going to focus on the bit about the planes that I can cross-reference that you'll see as we get further into it. Anyway, he was driving to his accommodation. Out of the window of his car, he saw 3 F14 Tomcats circling a great big flying saucer, a UFO. So he managed to take 4 photographs, 2 of which I've recovered. The other 2, I'm not sure where they are. But they seem to show the planes acting in the way that he described. He said that they were making very, very slow passes and very wide turns, which is a classic loitering technique that saves fuel. So they would rotate, the 3 of them, sort of one having a good look, the other 2 taking a very slow bank round. I'm going to cut to the video of him giving the account of what actually happened, and then I'll show you what I found next.
Hello, my name is Amori Rivera. I live in Puerto Rico, and back in 1988 I was working in a nightclub, and there was a musical group there. One of my cousins wanted me to photograph the musical group, and she loaned me a camera with some film. So at this given time I heard some jets in the sky, and I still had my cousin's camera, and I took the pictures, 4 of which I'm making public nowadays.
So the jets followed the UFO?
Yes, it was. They seemed to be surveilling it. I only got to capture just one of the jets in the photograph, but there were 3 of them. Or maybe I got in one of the photos one, and in the second or third I got one of the other ones, because they would go around it very far away, and while this one was closer, and turn, very far, very far. And by the time this one was coming back, another one was turning over there. There was always one or the other close to the object, to the UFO.
Other witnesses contacted Amori himself.
So far, between 1988 and 1992, I've been able to localize 7 of these people.
So that was pretty cool. And then I found this video from the journalist Jorge Martin, who was giving an account of 3 F-14s, also in December 1988, chasing what he describes as a triangular UFO the size of a baseball field. Now, I appreciate there is immediately one discrepancy there, because Amori's account and photographs describe a saucer, whereas Jorge's describe a triangular craft. But given that there's no video and Jorge wasn't on the scene, well, I'm not going to let it slide, but it's something to bear in mind. And he's also describing 3 F-14s starting an intercept. However, his account, which apparently is corroborated by 100 witnesses, describes 2 of the F-14s vanishing, being taken out of the air either destroyed or captured or simply dematerialize him. I'm going to play his account in full because it's only a couple of minutes long, and I always think it's better if you hear it from as original a source as possible.
This happened in December 28, 1988 at 7:45 p.m. The people of the area of Cabo Rojo and Lajas, two towns to the southwest of the island, that night saw a very huge ball of blue light, as we see here in the drawing, that was flying over the Sierra Bermeja Mountains, a small ridge there where many of these incidents have been happening in Puerto Rico. And then this ball of light changed, and it changed to another color, to a huge ball of yellowish light, and the witnesses all could see that this was part of a triangular craft, very big in size, and this yellow light was underneath the object. It was a almost semicircular, something like a bulge or a ball of yellow light, very bright, and the two jet fighters were trying to intercept it, and in 3 different occasions made it veer away and change its trajectory, its direction. In the third occasion, the object stopped in midair. One of the jet fighters seemed to, as if it was going to collide with the object by the back of it. And the people began screaming because they believed there was going to be a collision and an explosion and something terrible might happen. But what happened was that the jet fighter just disappeared, vanished in midair, next to the UFO. The other jet fighter kept flying next to it by the right side of it, and then all of a sudden it also disappeared. It vanished. The UFO then came back again, turned around, flew over an area known there as the Saman Lake. It's a small pond surrounded by many palm trees. And over these palm trees, I would say about an altitude of 100 feet from the palm trees, it divided itself, this huge triangular object, into 2 different objects. It split with a luminous explosion, a soundless explosion of very bright light. And both parts of the craft, one flew very fast to the north and one flew very fast to the east and disappeared. There were other witnesses that say that there was a surge fighter that was checking on the situation from a distance. But when that pilot of that surge fighter saw what happened, apparently he tried to flee the area, and 3 small balls of red light came out from the UFO and began chasing it, and they disappeared to the north. They don't know what happened to this surge fighter.
How many witnesses followed this event?
Up to now, more than 100 witnesses.
What are your conclusions?
Well, this incident did occur. It's a very important one. When you have more than 100 witnesses that describe the same scene to you, they make the same drawings to you, what they saw. All the details fit with all the descriptions. And we have other information due to the investigation we made. For example, that this jet craft must have been from the Navy of the United States, because that day the Puerto Rico Air National Guard had no airplanes or any air practices in the area. And Roosevelt Naval Station in Ceiba, a principal base in the Caribbean from the U.S., did have some air practices that night and personnel in the area, even though they denied it. But the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration in San Juan, confirmed to us that there were practices from Roosevelt Naval Station there.
Interesting stuff. So, also worth mentioning, which I haven't included because it's only a snippet, is that Amori said in his account that he saw the craft tip up on its side and shoot off with very high velocity, which sounds very, very familiar with 36 years of hindsight to the now popular gimbal video that I'm sure you've all seen. The next step for me was to try and determine if there'd been any F-14s in that area at all at the time, and it turns out that there had. So the first thing I looked at, given that the F-14 was usually a carrier-based Navy strike fighter, was looking for aircraft carriers, and the USS Independence, which had recently had a refit, stocked Prowlers and Tomcats, bombers and strike fighters. That had passed through the area, but it wasn't quite the right time. It had said that in October it had sailed past, and we're talking about December, so that didn't sit well. However, watching Jorge's account again, he mentioned the Roosevelt Roads Naval Air Base. So I looked into that. Alright, so here's where things get sketchy. Now I googled Roosevelt Roads Naval Air Station, December 1988, and found this forum post from November 19th, 2010 by a user known as AH64 Apache. That is all we know about this guy, so it could be entirely fake. I can't in any way verify the veracity of their information. However, it is very detailed, and that makes it very interesting to me. I'm going to skim over it quickly, but he said that he was on active duty with the US Navy at Cecil Field Naval Air Station in Florida, but his friend was on station at Puerto Rico Roosevelt Roads. He greeted him when he first saw him in the AMD Work Center at Cecil Field and quickly noticed that he seemed a bit down. Upon asking what was wrong, he was told that Puerto Rico's base F-14 squadron had just lost 2 aircraft, which included all crew. The following is how their conversation went according to memory. So he asked him if he was serious. He replied yeah. He thought a moment and said mid-air collision, but much to his astonishment he said no. I then asked, what do you mean no mid-air collision? How then could they lose 2 airplanes on the same day? He noticed that he didn't seem to want to go into any detail, which was not normal for him. Normally this man, a dedicated sailor and skilled technician, would have been eager to tell him anything he could about an aircraft mishap, including his own speculations. The Navy would lose a plane somewhere ever so often, and he would normally get word of it very quickly through unofficial channels in the naval aviation community, and personnel were usually eager to pass on what news they could. He knew his shipmate had friends in that squadron from previous visits he'd made to Roosevelt Roads, or NAS Rosie Roads as they referred to it. But it was unusual to hear of 2 planes being lost in one day, and even more unusual for it not to be due to a mid-air collision. And as if that wasn't enough, it was becoming even more unusual because they were reluctant to talk about it. He pressed him. Well, what happened? Oh, I can't really talk about it, he said. There's an investigation still ongoing. That had never stopped any of us before from spreading news of an aircraft mishap. Suddenly I got the impression he'd been told not to talk. But I asked, well, can you tell me anything else? He basically added that the 2 planes were lost at apparently the same time, definitely on the same day for sure. And that was for some reason very hush-hush. This didn't make sense to me. We aviation maintenance guys had a grapevine that was fleet-wide. Anything significant to know about would be spread very quickly. Usually whenever one of our Navy aircraft squadrons would lose a plane, we would find out about it quickly and then wait for details to come in later. And usually the information was pretty reliable. But apparently nothing was coming out regarding this incident. I had hoped that maybe we would hear something later, but after considerable effort to find follow-up information over the next few weeks, I realised that the investigation had indeed been handled as top secret. This was unusual. I often wondered what must have happened, and although in the next few years I found myself visiting the base at Puerto Rico for a few weeks at a time on a number of occasions, I never thought to ask anyone on the base, or in that particular squadron, what had happened to those 2 aircraft on that fateful day. With the distractions of naval life, I didn't think very much about it over the following years. In 1992, the OP was discharged from the US Navy and went back into civilian life after 10 years of service. In the following years, he had his own sighting, and during the course of his interest in the UFO field, he read a book which had stated, December 28, 1988, at approximately 7:45 p.m, a large triangular craft, roughly the size of a baseball field, which sounds very familiar, was seen moving steadily along in the region near the Naval Air Station in Puerto Rico. 3 F-14s intercepted the moving UFO and apparently tried to force it to change its course. As the Navy fighter planes engaged the large craft, it slowed down its forward speed to a standstill. The rest ties up perfectly with Jorge's account, which may be the original source of this. However, the OP was amazed by the fact that after 20 years he was able to confirm an astonishing UFO encounter directly involving the military, and he was personally familiar with this very incidental incident, at least from the outer periphery. He knew for a fact that the US Navy in Puerto Rico did indeed lose F-14s, 2 of which in one day, and that there was a top secret investigation, the only time in his Navy career that he could not get a follow-up on a mishap. So for the last stage of my investigation so far, I decided to see if there was any record of the Navy losing 2 F-14s. Now every vehicle serial number is recorded with its ultimate fate. Veered off runway, burst into flames. It makes for quite depressing reading in most cases, unfortunately. However, cross-searching between the squadron, which I found out was the gunfighters, and an incident date of December 1988, I found this. So on the 16th of December 1988, the Navy lost 2 Tomcats. It says was run into by F-14A 159865 due to failing brakes, aircraft damage beyond repair, little or no information available. No record of where it took off from, no record of where it landed, no record of the pilots, which seemed very strange. Almost all the other accounts will have more information, destinations, crew, what it was doing, its purpose, if there was any fatalities involved. So the fact that there was no information, but in the middle of December of that year we had an account of 2 Tomcats being lost on the same day, adds a little bit of fuel to the fire. Make of that what you will. Now, just like I said at the start of the video, I'm not here to give you any conclusions or any made up bullshit presuming that I know what happened when I know exactly as much as you have. What I am here to do is just present a little bit of evidence that I've found because I find it interesting and I love Tomcats and I love flying saucers. So I'll leave the rest up to you. As I said, all the links to everything that I've found I've put in our UAP Files Discord for you to have a look for yourself. And if you find a little bit more out, I would love to hear from you because I find this case absolutely fascinating. So take it easy, keep your eye on the sky, and I'll see you soon.
All right, look at the guy to port. Look at the left one. He is on the deck. On the deck, below the bridge lane.
Gator, 26, Rocky 11, ready.